People are going to be going into this week feeling pretty anxious, particularly, of course, if you're one of the 94,000 Brits currently in the Gulf who's contacted the Foreign Office. So I thought that would be a good place to start. Are we drawing up plans to evacuate people?
Well, we are setting up the support systems because, as well as the 94,000 people who have been in touch when we set up the Register Your Presence system, there's an estimated 300,000 British citizens in Gulf countries that have now been targeted by Iran, including countries where now airspace is closed as a result of those attacks. That is, of course, extremely stressful for people who include holidaymakers and transit passengers at airports, people who have gone there for business trips, as well as those who live in the region as well. So we're saying to people the most important thing at the moment is to follow the local advice, which in most places is around sheltering in place. And we are sending out rapid deployment teams to the region to work with the travel industry, to work with local governments as well, to make sure that citizens can get support. Of course, we want people to get safely home as swiftly as possible.
Are we working on evacuation plans in the background? Is that something that is a contingency if needed?
We're working on every possible option. What we want, obviously, is for a resolution and for airspace to be reopened so people can get normal flights back again. But, of course, we are looking at a wide range of options, but working crucially with the travel industry and with governments in the region.
Including the evacuation if necessary?
We have to recognise the scale of this as well, and also the fact that there are strikes still underway, Iranian strikes on those Gulf countries, and Gulf countries who, frankly, were not involved in any strikes on Iran and who are now being targeted. And the most important thing, of course, is to follow safety advice in those countries. It is a fast-moving situation, and we are doing everything that we can.
I don't mean to hurry. There's just so much to information that people will want to know this morning. A British RAF base in Cyprus reportedly hit by a drone strike from Iran. Can you give us any more information on that? What happened?
You're right that this is an unmanned drone strike, specifically on the airport runway, and we're not able to provide further information and detail at this point. But obviously, all of the precautionary measures are being taken around the base.
Is the UK now a target for Iran?
So we've got 300,000 British citizens in countries that are already being targeted. We have seen strikes come extremely close to British personnel and to locations where British citizens are.
It's an important question to ask, though. Do you believe that the UK is now a target for Iran?
Well, we don't know the full details of this particular drone incident on Cyprus or the timings of it either. So I don't want to speculate specifically on that one. What I would say is we're already seeing our partners in the Gulf and locations where we have large numbers of British citizens and holidaymakers, tourists who are in the region, and they are facing now. Over the weekend, they've seen Iranians, we've seen hundreds of ballistic missiles and thousands of drones fired from Iran on those countries. And that's why this is significant.
Can I ask now about the UK government response? Because it's changed, right? So initially, Keir Starmer said that we are not involved in this at all. We refuse to request for the Americans to use our military bases to launch strikes on Iran. That's now changed because he says that he has now agreed to a US request to use military bases to strike Iran. Why has that position changed?
Well, this is about the defence of our partners in the Gulf and defence of countries where we have so many British citizens and interests in those countries. We continue to believe that we want to seek negotiated solution, a diplomatic process. That's always been our view, and it's one of the reasons why we made a deliberate decision not to be involved or provide support for the US strikes that took place over the weekend.
So it's now defensive. That's what you're saying. I just want to try and unpick what defensive means. So is any strike on Iran or its bases now seen as defensive because of what's happening, or is it only on specific intelligence that could impact the UK? What does defensive mean?
It's a specific limited agreement about the defence of Gulf countries, and many of those Gulf countries were not involved in any of the strikes on Iran. And so, for example, it doesn't mean political and economic and infrastructure targets, But there is a significant issue about ballistic missiles and launchers that are effectively pointed at the Gulf, pointed at our partner countries and countries where we have so many British citizens. So to not provide support, the support that the US have specifically asked for that defensive operation, I think would not be the right thing to do when we have so many British citizens there.
I'm just going to read you Zap Plansky's response to this, the leader of the Green Party. It took just one phone call from Donald Trump for Starmer to jump into yet another Middle East illegal war, failing to learn the lessons of the tragedies of Iraq, Libya and Syria. So just one phone call from Trump and now the UK is just falling in with whatever America wants.
Well, that's simply not true. And there have been a series of discussions that we always have with the US, with other allies as well.
So it's been a couple of phone calls then, not just one.
We took a very specific decision not to provide support for strikes that were taking place over this weekend. We have been clear that we believe that there should be a diplomatic process, negotiations process. There is a major threat from Iran, not just to the region, but internationally.
But
there are attempts to provide nuclear operations and also ballistic missile threats,
this is kind of the
and
point,
also
right?
the brutal attack in the region.
If it was so important to not be involved in the strike that we decided to not use the bases, and now Iran has done what would be utterly predictable that it was going to do, and we've just changed our mind. I guess a lot of people will be worried about, the West getting involved in another Middle East conflict, right? Particularly when there doesn't seem to be any plan for what happens when it comes to regime change, any long-term plan. You can understand people's concern, right?
And I think there'll be a lot of concern, including from those who are there in the region at the moment. So many of our partner countries, and I have spoken to foreign ministers across the Gulf, who were frankly shocked and horrified at the way their countries have been targeted by Iran over the weekend. And they have been appalled by the attacks that they have faced from Iran, and they are seeking support and defensive support as well. And that is why I think it's so important that we recognise the responsibilities that we have around defensive support for areas where we have our citizens.
Some in the Greens would say that this is not just defences, it will be seen as escalation, and it is us getting involved in another crisis in the Middle East where we don't know when it's going to end or what's going to happen afterwards.
So we continue to take the view that actually we need to pursue diplomatic processes, we need to pursue negotiated agreements. Of course, we do face an Iranian regime which has brutally killed tens of thousands of its own people simply for protesting on the streets, who have posed a persistent threat to us in the UK, backing attacks here on UK streets as well. So this is a deeply malign regime and has now posing direct threats in the region to our partners and to areas where British citizens are currently sheltering in place and sheltering in hotels. And that is why we are supporting this defensive action. And it is limited. It is not involved. Simply involves the bases to be used by the US forces for those limited defensive action.
I know you've got a busy day today, but I've just got one question to squeeze in on domestic policy, if I may, because people granted asylum in the UK from today will have their refugee status reviewed every 30 months. Shabana Mahmood saying Labour MPs need to get behind the changes or risk a Nigel Farage government. I'm interested, I guess, in your view on it, because you, of course, were Home Secretary. You stopped short of doing this. Do you think it is the right policy?
Well, I think people want to see a system that is controlled and managed and is fair. The UK has always done its bit to provide sanctuary for those who have fled persecution alongside
But on
other
this
countries.
specific policy...
But this is specifically about saying it needs to be reviewed because there are situations where things change in different countries and we provide sanctuary, but then may not be needed because